Yeah.
Nothing?
Outlaws do advocates, we speak the truth. Got a mic in our hand, yeah, we're breaking loose. From behind the bars to breaking glass roofs, we're telling our stories and dropping mad truth. Yo, it's George Jesse, and hearing me on the mic. 3 outlaws on a mission, man, it feels so right. We were doing hard time, now we're dropping rhymes. Turn the hustle into hope, redefining our prime. From the prison yard to podcast fame, taking back our power, no more shame. We used to wear numbers, now we wear names.
Nothing gets me fired up like the Outlaws to Advocates song, man. Phenomenal. Joey Landon in the house, man. Good to have you over here. Been following you for a long time, as you know. You've talked to my boy Jerry. It's absolutely an honor to have you here, man.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're here. So, Outlaws to Advocates, I'm George.
Jesse.
Jeremy.
And Joey.
And Joey. Joey, tell us about you, man.
A good place to start, huh? My favorite topic.
I seen your mugshot online the other day. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's one of those, family portraits. That's what I call them. And it's like, I actually got them handed to me in a folder when I got 2 years sober. And my mom said, "This is your past and your potential." And there's no baby pictures of me. Very rare. Like I'll go visit my grandparents. I'll find a baby picture. Oh, can I have this? Please, can I have this? That's it. Because anything from like my life growing up was left in a box that I left in a house
Somewhere.
somewhere, right? One time or another. So my mom handed me this folder, and that's why I call them my family portraits, because when she would get a mugshot, like, he's alive, he's okay. Like there's a period of all of our lives where there wasn't pictures of us, so that's all we had was those.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they never were like good pictures. They weren't glamour shots. I got a glamour shots one I'll have to pull out. Like 12 years old in a suit that's 10 times too big, and they put this big clamp on your back because it's one size fits all for everybody.
Don't forget those days.
Those are great days, huh?
Yeah, they were. I'm just like everyone else. We got our story, we got our journey. But what's interesting is like the path that we took to sit at this table was the exact same.
Yep.
The exact same process. The guys we looked up to, the recovery, the 12 steps, service commitments, sponsorship, like exact same. But the path was all a little bit different. I mean, when you add up all the prison sentences, that you guys, got, most people did a lot more time than I did. Most people.
How much time did you do?
I finally got out of DLC when I was 22. And so, my journey is like juvenile, 12 years old. I was convicted of secondary burglary and trafficking stolen property. So that lands me in, juvenile detention during a very young age. And
Numerous diversion programs.
I learned real quick that it's impossible to get off probation in
Yeah.
Arizona. But even prior to that, like I'm used to consequences. I was the kid that was diagnosed ADHD and hand-fed Ritalin. Morning I would take this yellow pill, because the school had suggested due to my behaviors that I should get tested, through a blood test. I guess they can determine your ADHD. And so they start feeding me handfuls of amphetamines at a very young age, 6, 7. And then I'd have to go to the nurse's office at lunch and take a little purple pill, which was more amphetamines. I went from 20 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. That was my dose. I hate amphetamines because of that, But, the reason it got to that point was because there was like behaviors, throwing crayons at the teacher, popping the girl's pink ball with my pencil, just not capable of functioning, in class. But a lot of it was being bored. I'll blaze through the schoolwork, give me multiple choice. That's easy. You know what I mean? And so, if they would have just gave me a VCR to like, hey, this VCR is broken, Joe, and a screwdriver, I would have been fine. I wouldn't even need a Ritalin. Everyone has these like different learning, abilities and what makes us click. I think it's important that we find out what makes these kids click. Sometimes it's electrical. They got to understand like how 120-volt circuit works between the line, the ground, and the neutral. Like, that's the kind of shit that just drove me as a kid. Like, I'll take the bumper off the car. I'll take the sink apart. I could tell you exactly what part was wrong in the VCR and go, Dad, I need this. And he's looking at me like, what's that? Yeah, what, I can't get that. You know what I mean? Like, you can't get that roller. And so I always like to talk about that, you know, because of the consequences were so great. When I was 12 years old and I'm confronted with more consequences and greater consequences, it was like, it's not a big deal. You know, go to juvenile detention for the night. Like, this is kind of fun, you know?
Right.
And, you know, from 12 to 16, I'm just incarcerated, in and out, in and out. I cannot stay out. Can't pass those drug tests. I catch more charges. I get, you know, convicted for possession, you know, on school grounds. I'm constantly pulled out of school. I can't get a credit, you know, if my life depends on it. And at 16, I was sentenced to the Youth Recovery Academy. And, you know, it was like, you know, okay, all right, it's getting serious. But prior to that, you know, I go and see my judge. I'll never forget Judge Sanders. And you know, I tell my dad and I tell my judge, everyone, I say it's worth it. You know, the effects produced by drugs and alcohol are so worth it. Like, I'm willing to risk my freedom because a violation is 30, 60, 90 days. You know, a new charge, you go do 90 days, you know, get a new probation. Maybe you end up on a house arrest. You know, I had surveillance officers. I had the big gray box that goes around your ankle with a phone line, and it was fake. I found out. I just talked to the juvenile probation. They're like, yeah, those didn't work. We got GPS ones now that you got to charge and they beep, and they straight up told us last week. She's like, yeah, those didn't work.
Dr. Lanceman, huh? Yeah, she was like, yeah, those things are ancient, but they never worked.
I had a gray box. You had to have a home phone line, and you had to plug it into the phone line. And they told you if you cross the front line, it's programmed. It will notify us, and you'll be arrested.
Yeah.
It was all just. It wasn't even rechargeable. There was probably was full of cement, but it worked. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I didn't leave.
Yeah,
I didn't cut it off.
Right? Yeah.
And you know, so I finally tell them. I said it's worth it. You know, and that, you know, they schedule a psych eval before court. You know, what do we do, right? The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says we can give these doctors, we hardly give them a fair break. You know what I mean? Like, the doctors hardly give us a fair break. There's no wonder the medical profession has such a low estimate of recovery for us. Right? Because what do? I go into psych, I lie about when I use, how I use, and why I use. As a matter of fact, my mom's sixth husband abuses me, and that's what's wrong with me, you know? And it's all just this fabricated, you know, BS, so that I could get more medications, because by this time I'm exploring, you know, prescription meds, and they determine I'm severely depressed and suffer from anxiety.
Yeah.
I love Wellbutrin. I love Xanax too.
No.
And those are the symptoms, right, that I created in my head that I wanted this psychiatrist to diagnose me for because of the medications I knew would go along with it. And so I'm like, good, all right, that's the problem. And it's not me, and it's not marijuana. And so luckily, they had me screened for the Youth Recovery Academy. Now I sat in front of guys like you, Jeremy, right, that were like dead set on lived experience. I remember sitting down with Bud. He was running that program, and BHTs, and they did an interview with me, and they said, "You're in denial." I'm like, pissed. You remember? If anyone remembers the first time you were told you're in denial, you're pissed. You know what I mean? Like, I can figure this shit out.
Yeah.
You know, that ain't the problem. And, you know, facts, right? That's the thing.
Yeah.
When they put facts against us all, we can't deny it. When you got, you know, 10 DUIs, when you've been, you know, incarcerated more than you've been in high school, you know, like, there's a problem. And the facts they had were from task. They said, Ms. Landon, you have 36 months of positive UAs. You have a problem. You're 16 years old.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, but I quit now. I quit now. You know, this ain't worth it. You know, this was a little bit longer of a sentence that kind of frightened me with, you know, having the girlfriend life. And they said, we're going to go ahead and accept you. And I remember just going back to those cold, dark cells in Durango juvenile detention, right? And just bawling my eyes out, just bawling. You know, I mean, it felt like a life sentence at 16, you know? And, you know, I remember a lot of the time in juvenile detention, you know, it was different, you know? It was, you know, gladiator school, you know? Gosh darn, Sammy's in the front, right? The front two cells have toilets. And so once you made it there, you're king shit. The staff knows you. You got shirt colors, and Sammy, he couldn't get out of his room without throwing the water cooler at the teacher, or the COs, without like, I mean, he was out of control.
No.
And I'll call Unit 7. Here we go. Sit on the ground, put your hands on your head. And, I literally like lost my mind more than ever in a juvenile detention because of this segregation, right? Individual cells, you're by yourself. You know exactly how many bricks are in your room, no matter what.
Yeah.
You've looked at the bed and the toilet and tried to imagine how you could hang yourself with the blanket, and everything in the room is anti-ligature. But you're thinking about it because you have so much time just stuck alone by yourself. I hated juvenile time, because of, just sitting in the cell by yourself.
Yeah, that's hard as an adult, let alone when you're a kid. You're away from your family, you're away from everybody who loves you. I had no juvenile correction experience whatsoever, but I didn't know they isolated you like that. That's horrible, man.
Yeah.
Feel like you're telling my story.
Yeah,
I experienced
see?
a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You went through that too?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm grateful I did, though. I mean, I got sober at a young age. I was 21. And a lot of that was due to early intervention and consequences. I'm a fan of consequences.
Me too.
From parole, probation. Like, if there's no consequences, I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing.
No.
You know what I mean? If it's an easy way out every time, let's go. That wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
And so I go through that program when I'm 16, and I learn about triggers, relapse prevention. I do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Like, got this. I tell my counselor, Michelle, she smoked a joint once in high school, right? She's gonna help me overcome this addiction I got, And I said, I'll do what you want me to do now and while we're here on probation, but the day I get off, I'll smoke weed till the day I die. She said, oh, that's great. I won't sign a release paperwork. Hold on, let me think about this.
I hate marijuana.
Good addict I am. I come back, I thought long and hard, I want to change my life. I just blow through this, program and tell them the lies they want to do. I told my parents all my hiding spots, what triggers me, important stuff, right? Yeah. That side of things, they are important, right? But look, I wake up in the morning and there's a trigger, like that's the side of things I needed. How do I deal with triggers? Not identify them,
Yeah.
And so when I get out at 16, I found a solution, and it was called alcohol. And I specifically remember hiding in the closet from everybody, drinking a Miller High Life.
Yeah.
Like
Because you don't have a problem with it. You don't have a problem with alcohol, right?
And they weren't testing for it. And so at 16, I just full-blown alcoholic. There's a beer bong on the patio, before I go to school. I load that thing up and just slam it, had the valve on it, it was all homemade from Home Depot. Shit I probably boosted, And I remember sitting on the swing set in my dad's backyard, like, if I drank a beer, like I had to poke a hole in it with a pin on the top, you know what I mean, and just shotgun that thing, and like just drunk nonstop. There wasn't a time I wasn't drunk before school, during school, or after school. On the weekends, beer full of fridge from dad. He never knew anything was missing. There was a beer fridge in his room, and one out back and one in the kitchen, and that's how I lived my life. And I started to manipulate the system and thought I was greater than the system. So mom takes me to aftercare once a week for counseling, and she's proud of me. She knows I'm drinking, and she makes a deal. She says, Joe, you continue to pass your drug test. On the way home from counseling, I'll buy you a 6-pack of Heineken every week. And so now I'm manipulating mom, the court system, the treatment center, and she doesn't pull my cover. She never tells the treatment center that she's buying me beer. And mom was a number one enabler. I was the only boy, got 4 sisters. And so, that's how I got through probation. I tested out of high school at 16 years old. I took a high school equivalency test and, scored pretty high, like post high school, first year in college, grade 13.1 and everything. And the reason I did that was because it was impossible to get my credits. I had 0 at 16. So, what are you going to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Graduate when you're 19, 20? And so it was the easy way out. And I enrolled in a school called Universal Technical Institute in Avondale. And, just using God-given gifts. Like, I love cars. I can fix cars, VCRs, without the meth.
That's where it started,
Yeah. And, so a lot of things happen at that school. I learned how to traffic. Cocaine is where it started from the border, Nogales. And I met people there. It was a resource hub. It was all guys' school. There was like one girl. You know what I mean? And you didn't want to talk to her. And I meet Tony, and Tony's from Nogales, and his family sends him up here to go to school. They own a shop in Nogales. And Tony introduced me to cocaine. And so at 17 years old, I bought a Gixxer 600 street bike. It was a 2001. I had no license. It was suspended till I was 18 because of a drug charge. No insurance, no registration, never titled it, bought it cash. And I started running back and forth to this ranch that he had. And, he taught me how to cook cocaine, cut it up right there in Newport Apartments on MC 85 and, Dysart in Avondale. Multiply profits. I get addicted to the lifestyle. I love it. I'm the man, like people come to me and I'm selling cocaine to this girl, and she'd use our kitchen, and she'd be in there with this little bottle of ammonia and a spoon. And, one day she's like, here, hit this. And I take it. I'm like, how do you make that? She's like, you don't want to know. And so I'm just watching her every step, and she's putting the cocaine in the spoon with the ammonia, heating it up to an oil, hitting it with cold water, and it rocks. And it's freebase, pure cocaine. And so I ride my bike over there to Walmart and buy a gallon of ammonia. I'm not messing around.
You never have enough ammonia.
And, I get completely, strung out on this crack cocaine. And at one of these parties when I was just drinking before the cocaine even started, I'm sitting around and, there's 30 of us. These kids were all from out of state. Like mom would buy, they would rent a house for them for the 9 months to a year they were there. Like everything's paid for. It's just a party. They weren't expected to work. There's people from Alaska. There's people from California. And we're sitting around on this party one day, and these guys, they get in from Northern California. There was 3 of them. And they're passing around this blunt, and at the time, Hydro was $20 a gram. Nobody knew it. And they're like, you want to hit this? It's purple, herbal, grape bait, marijuana, all them great names. I'm like, I can't take UAs, man. And this guy, Tim, across the room says, don't worry about it, man. I got a Whizzinator. I paid $200 for this thing online. You could pee in front of anyone. And so instantly before I see this thing, I let me hit it. Regret, remorse. There's some good weed. I'm paranoid. I'm going to Adobe Mountain. This Whizzinator is probably the wrong size and the wrong color. I'm just tripping. The party's over. I go home and cry. But at that point, my color gets called the next day, and I go to his house, and I'm like, man, I need the Whizzinator, bro. And he digs through a couple boxes, and he freaking pulls out this harness. It's like a strap-on.
Yeah.
It's pressurized, against your waist. It's heated to body temperature, I mean, it looks like a strap-on.
Yeah, you can even get glove warmers and tap them in.
Well,
there
the glove warmers would overheat it, and you'd get caught. So you'd have to wear it 3 hours. So I'm walking around with a fake wiener for 3 hours, before I got to take a UA, so it regulates to your exact body temperature.
Oh, that's
and
crazy.
I pull it out, like, this is all me.
they had it. It was Puck Technologies that created it out of California.
And they worked.
It works.
It don't work nowadays. Any of our viewers,
absolutely.
like don't waste your money because, Task started, hold your shirt up with one hand out, 1 foot, hold the cup.
Yeah.
It ain't working.
Down there the flashlight.
Right. But back then, it
And
was
now they make
relaxed.
you make you start peeing and then stop. Like they stepped their game up, bro.
Because that hit and switch, you can only get to it. One time I forgot to hit the switch back off. Well, it didn't drain all the way because it was kinked. And so I put it back in my pants, and that thing peed all the way down the side of my leg.
Oh yeah.
It's fake urine,
I went to Task, obviously when I'm in my addiction, and I don't know how, but I knew somebody that wasn't using. I think from work or something, and he peed for me in an enema bag, and so I taped this thing under my arm, had a little clear tube running down my back, taped to my thing, blah blah blah. I walk into Task high as a kite, I squeeze the enema bag, and I got this dude's piss all down my side. I'm all,
They
baking soda.
Whatever. I'm dirty. That's it. I'm out.
Yeah.
This is before pre-baking soda. Like nobody
Baking
knew
soda.
about that then. Not my circle anyway.
Yeah, baking soda works, but you got to have someone with a truck give you a ride because it all comes out the other end. You know, like bubble guts. Like, yeah, I'm gonna have to sit in the back, bro. On
It's
the way.
amazing the effort we put into trying to.
I'd put bleach in milk, drink it after they caught us.
I'd go buy those things, the Ready Cleans. Those would work fine for me. The Super Cleans and Ready Cleans, you can pick them up at trails.
Yeah,
They were
$30 a
yeah,
pop,
$30
$50
a pop. Yeah.
Yeah, fake
I mean-
IDs, people peeing for you.
Yeah.
there.
Well,
Yeah.
the school drug tested, so we all carried our quick fix. And one day a guy needed to borrow mine, you know what I mean? And so I give it to him for the day, right? And I get it back. And I use the P in my Wizinator, right? I failed for cocaine, right? And I wasn't using cocaine at that time. And so I just put on this big show with parole probation and, you know, the counseling center. I was like, yeah, I messed up. You know, I just took the heat.
Yeah.
And they didn't send me back over it because I got honest and I wasn't even me. That dude scammed me. He stole my pee out of the bottle, you know, and gave me his.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, that's just, you know, I mean, I had a Visine bottle. I put bleach in milk and drink it, you know, before I had the Wizinator. I mean, I tried every attempt to be tasked.
Yeah.
And I'd still fail, but next week I'd be drinking bleach and milk.
Yeah.
Like it might work this time. Handfuls of niacin, you turn bright red.
Oh, gosh. I remember I took niacin, my whole body lit on fire.
Oh, yeah. You're in a cold shower.
It's terrible, man.
The lengths we go to, and it doesn't even work.
And it's so much work.
And we never get away with it.
Yeah.
Never get. The very last time I had a sriracha bottle in a place you don't ever want to have a sriracha bottle, trying to fill my wiener full of water. And I had been sober I had been sober for a long time, right? When I say a long time, at that time I used like twice that year, you know, so I had a much clearer mindset. And that, for whatever reason, in that moment, I was just like, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah.
I went and told Jerry. I was like, dude, he lived a couple of beds down from me. I'm like, man, I messed up. Get some speed. He's like, you're a fucking idiot. Yeah, I said, yeah, I know, man. I know. And then the next day that you aid me.
Yeah.
And when I went down there, went through that whole process, and I was just like, for me, that was it. That was the last time I used. So thank you,
Good
Sriracha.
feat.
You're not just good for
Yeah, that's good. Sounds like
for
it burned.
food.
Gotta
Yeah.
wash that out.
Yeah, it's gnarly.
Um,
You got sober at 21?
yeah. And so,
Then
you
what
know,
happened?
I got off probation successfully thanks to the Wizinator, actually. And I continued, you know, to traffic, you know, narcotics, and Oxycontin hit the market.
After 21?
No, before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. Oxycontin hit the market, you know, and, you know, I started trafficking Oxycontin from Mexico, you know, pharmacies. And, you know, when I was 17, mom started attending Parents of Addicted Loved Ones.
I love
And,
pals. They're huge.
Yeah, pal. Yeah. So I've been serving on their board for the last 6 years.
Have you?
As a board of directors.
Oh, that's
giving
awesome.
back.
They do good
for the-
work.
I hated them. They ruined my life. They educated my mom on enabling and just destroyed me. So, you know, by the time I'm 18, mom leaves, you know, my little sister's 15. You know, we hit the streets. She hits the group homes, and she becomes a ward of the state. And, you know, we just steal a bunch of sewing machines from Walmart until that runs out, steal a bunch of bird toys from PetSmart until that runs out, counterfeiting receipts. And, you know, it just all comes to an end. The car that we, you know, had, you know, due to fraudulent tax returns was towed. And, you know, my little brother's name didn't work anymore because I would get arrested and give his name, and they'd show up to the school and arrest him for failure to appear because he forget to go to court, you know? And I'm just running a wreck through this whole thing. And when I'm 21, I get arrested, you know, after I'm living in the canal at this point at 83rd and McDowell.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
a nice place over
That's
there.
what addiction,
is, yeah.
you know, brings you, you know? I
Nice.
mean, like
That's where I live now.
I started at 83rd, bro.
That's where I live
Right
now.
there by the Jack in the Box. If you go down by the freeway, I always, you know, it's like a $3.4 billion house. You know, the project. The Arizona
Yeah.
State Canal has a lot of cement, you know, infrastructure, free landscaping. You know, they come blow it.
Free water.
And so I ended up moving up to 99th and McDowell. I had my own bridge, you know, eventually. You know, and I'm strung out. You know, it happens quick. You know,
Absolutely.
it progresses. You know, I lose the street bike. I get kicked out of that UTI school because they have swab tests now, like saliva.
Yeah.
The quick fix. I had a bottle of quick fix on me. Mom leaves. Dad gives up on me, and you know, it's fucked downward spiral fast. And you know, by 19, I'm living on the street. I'm not the man anymore. I end up having to go pull a lick, and I get arrested in Avondale, for stealing 24s off of a truck. I also had that charge as a kid. And so now, I'm starting to get to that,
Escalated.
I'm getting to that third bracket, trying to rope, me, and the charges are getting more. And, I'm just stuck in this freaking canal. I'm breaking into houses, I cut my arm on a window, and they had DNA evidence on a house. They issued a warrant for a burglary on that with DNA evidence. And, I'm just waking up every morning doing push-ups to get blood flowing to hit a vein.
No.
And, my sister shot out with abscesses all over her arms. And, I'm taking showers at Chipotle because they got that deep metal sink on 99th and McDowell. If you ever eat there, don't use the sink. I had my old foot in there, dude. I'd steal bamboo and embroidered socks from Walgreens on the way to Chipotle. Got to be glued hair gel. Worked for like 3 months straight. Just add water, every day. And life's a mess. Life's a mess. I'm looking at my sister, and we're living, in this freaking canal. And we had a blow-up swimming pool we slept in. We had a throw-out rug. Ratcheting lawn chair. Like we were flying signs. Before everyone was flying signs. We're talking like 2007, 2008. I mean, I didn't invent it, but it ain't like it is now.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I got sober December of 2009, and so all those years prior, like we lived like $20 at a time.
Yep.
We've all been there. That's it. I need $20. That's it.
Yep.
My problem is solved. And so, we had money makers, right? And so when you're flying a sign, you have to develop like a limp, right? An ailment, right? So we wrap our arm with an ace bandage, like that's your money maker.
No.
My sister had a little chihuahua, like that thing made money. People feel
People
bad
cared
for
cared
the
about
dog.
the dog.
Come back with food and $20, and that's how my addiction ended. Living on the streets in a canal, and beating people with pipes because they'd steal your jacket, and
No.
just people dying in cars, that were homeless, people falling out and losing their limbs because of pulmonary edema. And it was freaking crazy when I sit here and think about it and talk about it. You know what I mean? And there was absolutely no way out. I don't just walk into CBI and detox and go, here I am. I'm here to detox.
Yeah. Fix me. Fix me.
Catch me when you can.
Yeah.
Like thank God for Sheriff Joe Arpaio, Phoenix Police Department, Sheriff's Department, Department of Corrections. Like I'm not the type of addict that could just stop. I needed those powers to stop me. And so when I'm sitting, in county for that 16th arrest, I volunteer to revoke my probation. I say I'm done. They want to reinstate my probation. The burglary charge got amended to criminal trespassing. I had a fire public defender. And I actually had the opportunity to thank her when I read through the case file.
That's
because
cool.
she did get it amended to criminal trespassing. And I'm like they want to give me 3 years probation and 6 months of county. And I'm like, there's no way. There's no way. So I do the math real quick on 1 year and 3 month early kick out, first time down. I'll be out of here in a couple months.
No.
This is the faster, easier way. And so I go back to the holding tank, and I'm just trying to convince everyone who's coming with me. Let me tell you, bro, I was the yard lawyer at that point. Hey, this is your third violation. You'll be back. Just come with me now. We can get this over with. Nobody came with me. Nobody. I'm like, trust me, I already know what's going to happen.
I got it.
And, I ended up landing out in Florence complex. And, that's where I found recovery.
Nice.
I started attending inside meetings. Reinhard Zimmerman brought the message for Alcoholics Anonymous. I got my first sponsor. We tried to work the steps, couldn't find them. We had the books, right? That's why I'm just dedicated to H&I. I've been going to Florence Complex as a volunteer, bringing a meeting for the last 8 years.
Where do you go?
I've been to every complex there is in Florence. Reining, Hyman, East, West.
Oh, nice. You hit them all.
I've been, the lifers. Used to go to Central, North Unit, both yards. Right. Currently, I'm on West.
Oh, cool.
A lot of those prisons shut down.
Yeah.
Recently, and so, I just did the whole prison tour.
Yeah.
In a different way, you know. And the reason I'm so dedicated to them is because I was in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and had a sponsor, and my sponsor asked me where the steps were. And that's how much there is a lack of knowledge of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous within our prison system. And so we wrote his aunt, and, you know, we're like, we need the steps. You know, she prints something off online and sends us a workbook, you know, like some treatment, you know,
Yeah.
packet, you know. And we're doing them, and we only had one copy, so we had to copy the questions, and I'm sponsoring him, he's sponsoring me. And, you know, what's weird is he's been back 3 times, and currently on the prison yard I go to, he's there. What's the chances of that?
Yeah.
My first
Yeah.
sponsor is incarcerated on the prison yard.
Yeah.
The one prison yard I bring a meeting to, you know, and I see so many guys in there that I know from the life, you know,
No.
Matt, you know, Tangy's in there, and, you know, Shane's in there, and just constantly they're like, oh my, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? You know? And, you know, that's where I get all those effects produced, you know, by Alcoholics Anonymous that used to get produced by drugs and alcohol. You know, like I drive to Florence on Thursday for an hour and a half, have an hour meeting, and drive an hour and a half home, and it's the best night of my week.
It's fucking worth
You
it, ain't
know?
it? Yeah.
Like those guys, like they're waiting at the gate, like they're waiting for dad to come home, you know, as a kid,
Yeah.
like just so excited that,
Yeah.
you know, it's Christmas and they get to open presents, you know, because we speak this message that, you know, the truth and it relates to them, you know, and, you know, life's just continued to get better. You know, I mean, mom's back in my life. When
That's
I got
awesome.
sober, I called mom. You know, I was 21. I hadn't seen her in some years. And she actually came and picked me up from the parole office. And I paroled to a fake address. I want to get out, right? Still had the idea that somehow, someday I would beat the game, right?
Yep.
Drink like a normal, more about alcoholism.
Absolutely.
And I pulled this letter out because her number was in it from my dad. My dad wrote me a letter after sending him 5, you know, asking him for like, you know, I'm hungry, you know, I need the good shampoo, I need deodorant, and you know, I need a pack of midnight special,
Yep.
you know, and I'm still lying and manipulating my family, you know, from the inside, right? All those guys that are sitting in there doing that right now, you know, check your motives. You know, what are you really wanting? You know, what are you putting in those letters? And he never writes me back. And towards the end of my sentence, he writes me a letter. And at the end of it, he says, I really hope you're having a horrible, shitty time in prison. I hope you hate it so much you'll never do anything to risk your freedom again. But you're a man now. The only way history will repeat itself is if you make the change. I hope you understand I can't see you or even talk to you on the phone when you get out. I look forward to the day we can be together and feel each other. Damn, I bawled. I bawled my eyes out. That was tough. Everyone gave up.
You have
on
that whole
me.
letter memorized.
Oh yeah, that was just the last paragraph. It was 4 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, something that impactful in your life, you know, you can never forget. And so
right. That's right.
it still wasn't enough, though. You know, I tell you, I stood at that parole office after reading Narcotics Anonymous, doing the basic text, doing the steps, and thought that I deserved a talk can with that gate fee.
Yep.
But one thing, right, that we can't discredit that those institutions do for us all is they give us a conscience, enough time away from substance to know right from wrong. And I was like, had this conscious thought that was like, call your mom. And I called my mom. She said, I took today off. I knew you were getting out. I hoped you called. She said, I'm going to come pick you up. She'd moved to New Mexico. I hadn't seen her. She said, I'm back in Arizona. Picks me up, brings me to her condo out in Anthem. And I hold this little boy. He's 2 years old. It's my little brother. My mom had in vitro. She, you know, had a baby. And it's just this life that, you know, I didn't know I had. But damn it, I got out in March and they had a green beer flyer for her clubhouse. And I thought I was going to go there and drink green beer. You know, and luckily she brought me to a halfway house in Sunny Slope called Sanctuary Sober Living. And I sat there and interviewed with the staff members and they said, yeah, we'll take them. I'm like, what's this mean? Get a sponsor, get a home group, you know, and I went to the stag meeting and my first night out, I went to the Razor's Edge and I went to a, you know, Wednesday and Thursday the nights and Friday Fellowship Under the Stars, and slowly but surely, you know, I got to brainwash my dirty brain, you know, and you know, I remember sitting at the stag and this guy got up and he talked about running around the canal with a backpack on and wires hanging off of it so that it looked like a bomb. And I'm like, that's my sponsor. You know, and I asked that dude to sponsor me, and we sat in the back of the halfway house in Sunny Slope, and just like that, I had a spiritual awakening. 5th step, 6 and 7, I reviewed. I remember just sitting there reviewing all this stuff we went over and going, wow, I'm the fucking problem. I'm a piece of shit. And that's like when the real change happened, months sober, right? So the guys that are facing that, you know, hold on, you know, like the thought to drink didn't leave me instantly when I got sober. Today, there's no question, right? And the book says we learned that we needed to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. That's the first step in recovery. Like when you know with every fiber of your being, everyone sitting at this table just knows.
Yeah.
If we leave here and drink, it's bad news.
Yeah.
It's not going to end well. Might not make it home. Everything's going to get clucked off. You know, people might die. You know, I might die. Like, there's no question about it. And there's a lot of other things. Like my tape player, it ain't broken today.
Yeah.
I can
That's
play
for
the
sure.
tape through.
Absolutely. It's Jesse had said something. He was in one of my group. I was a peer in prison, and he was in one of my groups when we first reconnected. He was going through Second Chance Center. And he said, what'd you say? The craziest thing we do, right, when we're sober is decide to put that substance back into our body. And we do that when we're dead sober.
Yeah.
And
That's
even
right.
after that whole path, after I'm over 5+ years sober, I'm super happy. I got a great job. I love my life. Everything's great. But every now and then, I want to go have a beer. And in my mind, I could tell you right now with a completely straight face, I could probably go have a beer and be okay. But what if I can't?
Yeah.
I know what that side of the coin looks like, and there's no way I would roll those dice.
Yeah. If I have a beer, I'm
There's
buying crack and picking somebody up that I shouldn't be picking up. And I'm going to burn through it as much as I can. And
But my dope fiend tells me I'll probably
Title
be
loan.
okay.
Sunday,
try to buy an RV I can
had
live
a
in.
beer. Thursday, broke into a house.
Oh, man.
Camper on the pickup truck.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I think it's that realization that drugs and alcohol make the problem worse, and just realizing that, you know, sobriety's got a couple different pieces to it. You know, there's the getting sober and then there's the staying sober. And for me, my recovery's evolved to a place to where, honestly, it's not about not getting high or not drinking. It's about learning to live life without the substance. You know, that's what it's about, learning to live without it.
Yeah.
Because for so many years, I could not live without it. I had to have it. I didn't know how to process emotions, anger, feelings, relationships. I didn't know how to be responsible. I never grew up. I'd always been a child, you know, and every time something got hard in my life, I would quit and I would go back to using drugs. Every single time. And your story is almost identical to mine. I mean, I went through juvenile programs, juvenile treatment centers that hit me with medication, in and out of every possible program.
Scared straight.
Scared straight?
Scared straight. I went to Pioneer to federal prison when I was 13.
Have you ever seen the data on that?
Yeah, I went to
It's
that.
horrible.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
Destroyed those kids.
Yeah, I
Well,
was
it
part
didn't
of that.
look that bad, is what I thought when I went out to Pioneer. I'm like, that's it? Is that a tennis court in the background? Dude,
Tennis
come on. You know where I'm at? You see my double cuffs? You know what I mean? And they made you double cuff your pants and juvenile.
Yeah, I remember Scared Straight. They walked me through Central Unit when I was about 13 or 14 years old. And all the guys are banging on the doors. Put him in here with me so I can have some fun with it. You know, just trying to scare the kid. And I'm just thinking, what the fuck is this?
Oh, yeah. we went through the same program. They thought it was a good idea. When you get to the barbed wire at Pioneer, they're like, you know, that the last guy that jumped at, he cut every single tendon in his body. He's a paraplegic now. You know, he tried to escape. Like, oh, don't do that.
Yeah, I can even relate to the
So
alternative
don't
school.
run.
Yeah. Yeah, the alternative school. I mean, the exact same thing. I'd been kicked out of every possible school to where I got shoved into a place to where nobody, you know, all the kids that got kicked out of every other school ended up at this place. And of
Lone
course,
Cactus,
they're not the
Pure
most
Accelerated.
ombudsman. Yeah,
I went to all of the alternative school. I never went to regular high school.
I went to a magnet program, Isaac Himes, right off 59th and Grand.
Yeah.
I fit right in.
Yeah.
I fit right.
I mean, getting sober at 21, I was a baby.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that we need to treat the kids, you know, differently that are 18 to 21, you know, young adults. Like I never had a job, you know, you guys, you know, get sober in your 30s. Like there was a little bit of life in there, hopefully, you
45.
know. So there was some life in there, but like I didn't have facial hair like, you know, my balls just started to drop. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Puberty was delayed due to opiates
Yeah,
use. You know
absolutely.
what I mean? And I'm 37 now, and I've just learned to live life. You know, I got married in sobriety, bought my first house in sobriety. You know, at 8 years sober was one of the worst years in my life. I was suicidal um, due to financial insecurities. I bought a house. My wife was pregnant. Life was good. But somehow, some way, I strapped everything I had to buy the house. Max, you know, had to pay all these credit cards, borrowed money from her parents. I owed them 16 grand to buy the, you know, like it didn't feel like success. It felt like I'm never going to get out from under this, you know? And funny story, how I got through that is important to share was helping others. And so at the time, you know, I became manager of Sanctuary Sober Living and, you know, ended up becoming CEO in 2012. And so I implemented a program at the MRC where I would give guys like DJ Cruz, Wayne Giles, you know, and a couple others, you know, 30-day scholarships because I wanted to see what housing did for outcomes. And it did miracles in those guys' life. You know what I mean? And so I get Wayne. Wayne's done 15, 16 years in prison. You know, he's this gay dude. And you know, nothing's free. You know, and so the house I bought, I'm like, hey, we got to go scrape these popcorn ceilings as part of your scholarship.
Yeah.
And I got no money. I got no budget. You know what I mean? I got free work for a guy I give free housing to. And, you know, he's sitting there. I still have the radio. It's a little Ryobi radio. And he puts on K-Love. And he just hums at the top of his lungs, it's Jesus. And he brought me right back to God. I hit my knees in my daughter's room. This is my daughter's room now, and said, God, help me. Shit, fuck up. I started talking about the thoughts and the visions that I was having, you know, not with professional, with the fellowship, with you, with him. Like I was speaking at a meeting open, like, this is the way I feel. I'm 8 years sober, and I'm thinking about a gun,
Yeah.
you know? And I pulled through it, and things haven't been the same since. And my relationship with God has improved. You know, I mean, there's a point in Alcoholics Anonymous for me where the spirituality peaked. You know, there was nothing more I could have gained from there. I needed to go to the big book, big book, and learn a little bit more to satisfy my soul. And I can't master that book yet. You know what I mean? Like,
Good luck.
I mean, yeah, the
Good
Bible's
luck.
just huge. But I got involved in the church. You know, I still do AA. I'll never forget where I found God. My wife's a volunteer for the church and the children's program. I have 3 daughters. I got my rights restored as a convicted felon.
That's huge.
And I got them restored, and then I got set aside judgment, and then ultimately they sealed my record, you know, as an adult. I got a level 1 fingerprint clearance card from the state of Arizona. I applied to the ATF. I got 5 suppressors. You know, all the stuff they told you as a felon you'll never do and you'll never have. You get class 3 ATF clearance. You know what I mean? To house weapons at
And you
my
like
house.
to spend a lot of time out in Glamis, right?
Love
With your friend.
Glamis.
Glamis.
You know, off-roading, passionate about it. You know, you see me doing wheelies in that
Yeah.
green car across Glamis. You know, it's just, you know, I spent a lot of time figuring out different forms of medication, whether, you know, it was, you know, with the dogs. I mean, I love dogs. There's a, you know, like the only job is to give love and receive love, you know, and
That's it.
train them and walk them like fish, real big into fish tanks, you know, saltwater fish tanks, just like hobbies, you know, and they've all come and go through the years.
No.
Like
Turtles.
turtles, I love
Yeah,
turtles
you-
too.
you-
I got
huge
one at
fans,
home. We got a turtle sanctuary at one of the locations.
Yeah.
We got,
Nice.
you know, a whole outdoor pen for them.
You got a turtle sanctuary at
Yeah.
sanctuary?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
dope.
Yeah.
Big turtles?
Yeah.
Little turtles?
Big
Yeah,
tortoises.
Yeah.
I got a little baby at home that we rescued, and you know, life just hasn't stopped. You know what I mean? Like as soon as I hit this point where like, oh, it can't get any better. You know, something new happens. You know,
Yeah.
like going on the board of PAL, getting my, you know, clearance card for Department of Corrections. You know, and just the situations that I've continued to be put in continue to remind me that it ain't over. This
Yeah.
ain't as good as it gets. You know,
No.
like what's next? You know.
That's something that I've learned already, like, because I went back and I looked at, I was part of this reentry program, right? And we were helping people prepare for reentry. So I prepared for reentry. I had all these goals and these plans and all this stuff. And I go back and look at that. I looked at it the other night. Justin Benjamin was over here, and he's the one who taught me how to do that. And so after he left, I looked through it next morning, and everything's so different now. Right? If you would have told me I'd be in marketing 11 months out of prison, I'm a peer support. And that's literally what I am, right? But because I planned, because I was ready for certain opportunities, I was able to step into them when they became available. We don't have to know what's coming. We just have to be ready for those things, like learning what's fun.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know what's fun. I learned a few weeks ago, I got invited to go do Brandon Lee's Art of the Soul. And
Yeah.
I don't do art, right? It's not something I'm involved with. And I cannot tell you how uncomfortable I was with that whole process, right? It made me realize.
He's jamming out, smiling, happy.
Yeah, everybody's having a
Get
good
me
time.
in that groove.
Yeah, absolutely.
It
The
happens.
experience is great. It just made me realize, hey, I got to start exposing myself to more of this art stuff and something creative, because I shouldn't be this uncomfortable. It's very healthy. This is something fun to do. And it made me realize, hey, here's an area where I can start exploring, right? It's so awesome to grow into this and to see what stuff comes and
Yeah.
to be ready for it and to have the mindset of acceptance and be able to accept things when they come to you, right? It's just
Wow. It's crazy to see all these, guys like yourself too. And Justin Benjamin.
yeah,
He's a change maker.
absolutely.
He's the
Absolutely.
result of why I was at MRC by being invited. The reason I scholarship DJ and Wayne and Eric
Yeah.
Fredrickson, all those guys,
Yeah.
because he invited me in. He knew what it took to create change.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to see him, play more parts and change again.
He's coming on here to talk about how to date a hot chick. So a little preface for what's coming on. He's got a whole graph that he drew.
Yeah.
Justin gets into when he gets
Yeah.
into stuff, he gets into it.
Yeah.
So he's going to be coming on in a couple of weeks.
I mean, just this stuff wasn't around
Dude,
for me. You know what I
what's
mean?
Insane.
2010, like nobody was talking this language. There was no assistants leaving Department of Corrections.
No.
There was a halfway house that if you were lucky they let you in, and it was called the Maverick House or TLC. I lived at TLC, loved the place. You know what I mean? Saved my life.
Did it?
You
That's
know,
awesome.
I brought a meeting to TLC for 6.5 years when I got out. Like, the worst of the worst. That's where I go. You know what I mean? Like the guy digging in the dumpster. Hey man, I can relate. And God rest his soul. My good buddy Dave G. I mean, I that's how I met him. He panhandled me. I watched him scrap bicycle rims for 22 cents. Like, dude, is that really worth your time? But I can talk their language. Like those are my friends. Like the leopards of the world. We build them up. I mean, I watched the man get, sobriety,
No.
multiple cars,
Yeah, and-
motorcycles.
So this is great. I'm glad
know?
you're going down this little area right here because of some of the stories that I've heard on side notes is that, well, you have Helping Hands Auto too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I got
Helping Hands Auto
Blessed
off
to
Cave
start
Creek
that.
and Peoria, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, started
And-
that business out of a halfway house garage.
Yep. And you have invited individuals like Dave to sleep on the couch, work there, do whatever. Just
Yeah.
do whatever you're gonna do, man. Help out around here, and we'll watch you get sober, right?
Yeah, I gave Dave the keys one weekend. He got kicked out at a halfway house or something, and I come in Monday. He's got the whole neighborhood in the front parking lot. Everyone's is MacGyver here? Where's MacGyver at? You know what I mean? Hearing that nickname in prison, he was doing
Always fixing
12
stuff.
years,
Yeah.
7 months on a manslaughter case. Robbing a house and co-defendant killed someone.
No.
And he had all his clothes in the sink, and he had everything spread out on the couch in the lobby. I'm like, clean this. We're open, dude. And everyone's just showing up. Is MacGyver? I'm like, "Ugh, this dude. I'll do it again for him, though.
The life we choose. Right?
I do it. A lot of times I tell guys, I say, look, man, if you're serious, because my life was the shop when I was building it, 12 years ago. I said, if you're serious, you go to that church right across the street from the shop, and when I show up at 8 in the morning, you walk over and talk to me, put you to work. You know what I mean? They
No.
sleep in the bushes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Come
Yeah.
talk. And, helped a lot of guys out, took a lot of guys right out of jail. Ethan, he's a missions rep for us for Sanctuary now, and came straight out of prison.
I met Ethan at Aurora.
Give him a
Ethan,
halfway house
good
and
people.
a job, and and just give people opportunities they never had because someone did it for me.
No, it's
it was a struggle.
absolutely
Nothing about this has been easy getting out. as a felon.
No.
And it's important to stress that, because getting out thinking this is all smooth sailing and it's going to go as planned, it's not.
We talk about it all the time. You choose your hard. Being a dope fiend was pretty fucking hard.
Yeah.
Why would this be easy? It's a little bit more fun. It's a little bit more safe. I get to get high every day and I don't stick anything in my arm. I'm not risking AIDS and every other thing I did in addiction. And I feel 10 times as good when I get to be of service.
Yeah.
And people will say stuff. I had guys in my prison group tell me, they wrote down qualities of each other. It was a little thing we did in there. And for me, they put down selfless. And I'm like, why would you put down selfless for me? And they're, well, you give up your time every Friday. I'm like, if you think this is selfless, you're driven. I do this shit because it feels really, really good.
Yeah.
It also happens to benefit other people, I guess, if that's what you're saying. But it feels really good. You know what felt really good? 10 months out of prison, I just signed his DOC thing to go in and his.
Nice.
I was like, how am I signing for people to go in? I'm on there, the assistant director, the attorney general, and somebody else.
Wow.
And they needed my signature on that piece of paper. I'm like,
We're the change makers.
dude, it's
You know?
unreal what we get to do now.
I
It's
mean-
absolutely unreal.
Got that fourth signature today too.
Yeah, you did.
You look at the North Unit, you
Yeah.
know, guys, man, there's a good group of guys that came out there. I
Oh,
brought back to
phenomenal.
basics too.
Yep.
Some years ago, and every single one of them just crushing it,
Yeah.
killing it. And so when I got to Florence West after COVID lift, 4 people in the meeting just dead. And so it's our job to influence them
Yeah.
and to use the resources around there. So I'm like, all right, guys, we're going to make a flyer. Who can draw? You know, you got good
Yeah.
artists. So they drew this badass flyer with an eagle, and we called it Freedom Fighters. And it had the yard, and like they were walking up. And we made a flyer and then got it, you know, someone got copies of it, you know, from a CO3.
Yeah.
And we posted it everywhere. You know, we got 26, 30 guys in that meeting now. You know, Jeremy's been out there with me.
It went from 4 to almost
Yeah.
30. That's
Yeah, and so
phenomenal.
like
Good
when the
job, man.
holidays come, I'm like, you guys are going to do an alkathon.
Yeah, it was
You know,
great.
you can
There
do a
was
speaker every hour, and then at
Yeah.
night do the main speaker. You know what I mean?
And there was a dude that was
Oh,
in
that's
there.
dope, man.
It was like his first time. He's like, I'd never been to a meeting before. This was cool, man. This was so cool. I was like, man, we'll see you soon. You know?
yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I was in the RSAT Monday, and we're sitting in a
Was it?
group, and this guy's like, "Oh, hey, I showed up. They made me come to this stupid program, and you know, I'm here for like 2 weeks now, and like, I'm thinking a little bit differently." I'm like, "Oh, can you imagine the shit works?"
Yeah.
Right.
He's like, "Yeah, it tripped me out. I didn't want to be here. I figured everybody was this, that, and the other." When you start leaning into yourself, you have someone that brings that light in there. Even if there's nobody there, RSAT has lived experience that works on the unit, right? They have people that go in there like us, and then they have the peers that are still incarcerated. Some of them are lifers that lead these groups every single day, and they're turning that light on and finding hope. And it's just see the
important.
to see the
That's
realization
where
on that
that-
guy's face was unbelievable.
That's where that big football brisket
Yeah.
came from. Was our stat graduation today?
Can't wait.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
had like a food truck out there. And
They're doing it like that.
yeah,
Phew.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
so,
No,
You know what I mean? I've never seen anything like the movement we're seeing in the Department
Yeah.
of Corrections.
They-
It's
they-
incredible.
yeah,
dude, I've been at an event with the director. I was at the event, and the director was also there. Recovery bus, and usually, you know, if we're having conversations like this, some things get said in rooms that stay in the rooms, and a different message gets carried out there, especially with people with positions of power. And I've heard this man say in public, "Hey, if you have a crazy idea, bring it to me. I need people in the prisons." He's all, "Kristen brings me crazy stuff all the time," talking about Kristen Day.
Yeah,
He's like, and we sign off on it. We just built an art studio on 2 different
Yeah.
yards.
it works.
And he's saying this in public. He's walking the walk, and whether people
Mm.
like it or not, prison's changing, right? The approach is changing. If the shit that they were fucking doing worked, it would be working.
Yeah.
They did it
Yeah.
long enough. You had your trial
Right.
run.
Yeah.
You got enough evidence
Yeah.
and data to say that
very
it doesn't
long
fucking
dry
work.
run.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of it's based out of, Alcoholics Anonymous too. I mean, the nonprofit, one of them I serve on, we have meetings in 36 states, over 200 meetings, and it's all based off of, how Alcoholics Anonymous was formed. We have facilitators, when you look at, the outcomes that peer support's having, the lived experience inside the prison, we've never done this stuff before,
No.
It's like the same as going to a meeting and hearing a guy say your story. You know what I mean? You're like, okay, I can trust him. The book says you'll win the confidence of an alcoholic in
Yeah.
a few hours, but until that's done, nothing or little can be accomplished. A lot of times we do it in about 20 minutes
No.
when we
Yeah.
go pitch in there. As soon as we speak a little bit of their language, it's like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking
Yeah, he
about.
gets it.
But looking at us today, That's not, what we do. I mean, I've toned it back a lot. Anywhere I went, everything I did was about recovery. I talk to and tell my story. You know what I mean? Now I'm like, all right, you got to be professional.
Yeah.
They don't want to know what you did
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
drugs and alcohol. They don't want to know where you lived.
Yeah.
You could still, speak the hope.
Well, that's a skill though. You learn what proper disclosure is, right? In different environments.
Yeah,
So
to the right people.
we talk about transparency. We just spitball everything. And then I go in and ask for a mortgage and say, hey, I got my rights read to me for fucking attempted murder. They probably don't want to talk to you anymore. All right. Different things for different people. But we're getting down here to the last minute or two.
Yeah.
What do you want to leave everybody with? First of all, I'm really, really glad you're here because you're someone I know a lot of people look up to. You've blazed a path that a lot of people would say is impossible, especially people that are still working on self-esteem, still listening to those thoughts in their heads, own multiple businesses, huge in the recovery community, run a great, I don't know what you guys call it, but great place of healing, sanctuary recovery centers, helping tons of people. It's just, it's awesome to have you here, man. So thank you. What do you want to leave everybody with?
The best thing to always leave anyone, with is to really look at your relationship with power greater than yourself. Who is that? Do you trust in that process? Are you building in that process? It's been huge for me later in recovery. I mean, it's definitely changed over the years, but, really looking at the third step, like the actor scenario. Yeah. I get jammed up trying to think that it should be this way or that way. And then when I'm just really realized that everything could go away tomorrow and I'll be okay.
That's awesome, man.
Probably be a roofer or something, That's
Roofing's-
a hot
roofing's
thing
cool.
right now. It's cool.
Yeah, roofing blew up. Everybody's
Yeah,
a roofer,
right.
project manager. All right, guys, what do you guys want to close out with? You got something? real
Yeah, I'll
quick? We
piggyback
got
off
about
that
2
just a little
minutes.
bit. So, I was raised in the church, and there's been times in my life when I wanted nothing to do with God. But almost instinctively and automatically, any time in my life when I've been in some serious shit, I've called out for help. Over the years, I've evolved on what exactly it is that I believe, and I've come to a point to where I just believe that it's beyond comprehension. But one thing that I know is that when I try to stay connected to something greater than myself, I just seem to be a better version of myself. I don't really know how it works. I just know that it does work.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Jeremy?
We witness the miracles all the time, right? And that was like one of the things that I'd highlighted and you highlighted tonight was the amount of selflessness it takes for somebody that's doing a life sentence to help other people go home. I was like, if you can only imagine what that vulnerability or tapping into that feels like, but like Jesus had this stuff figured out so long ago, bro. Right? And when, Bill W. sat with Dr. Bob, or when Ebby Thatcher came and saw him, he saw that light, right? But it wasn't until he shared his experience that led to that, moment of clarity where we all, tap in and say, all right, that's my bottom. I can't do it. You can. Please help me.
Awesome.
So
all three of you guys had really nice and powerful things to say. I'm going to end on something different, man. Do the fucking work.
yeah,
Do the work.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about it. Everybody,
yeah,
they got this plan. I'm going to put this together. I will take 20 minutes of action over 2 years of fucking planning any day of the week. Get out there, do the work, chase your dreams. Know you can do it. There's nobody who can tell you no. Joey's got I don't even know what it is, but a level 3 ATF clearance, which is insane. Been to prison, have a level 3, whatever that is. I'm trying to get a level 1 fingerprint clearance card. But yeah, it's awesome having you here, man. I hope everybody got a good message. Reach out to us. Anybody we can help. My phone number is 480-527-6326. Anything you got going on, anytime, email, call, whatever that looks like. You guys have a great night. Thanks, Joey.
Thank you.
thank you.